Don't embarrass me. That's what my sister hissed into my ear the moment I walked through the restaurant door. I didn't say a word. I just smoothed my navy silk dress, adjusted my pearl earrings, and followed her into the dining room of one of the most exclusive restaurants in Georgetown. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea. My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 42 years old. And for 13 years, I watched my older sister Victoria tell everyone who would listen that I was the family disappointment. The failure. The cautionary tale. The sister who never quite made it. She told her friends. She told her boyfriends. She posted about it on Instagram, tastefully, of course. The way people do when they want to wound someone publicly while maintaining plausible deniability. She told her fiancé's family. She told his father. And his father already knew my name. Not because of Victoria. Because we'd served on judicial panels together. Because I'd argued cases before him when I was a federal prosecutor. Because for the past 13 years, while my sister was busy building her identity around being better than me, I had been sitting on the federal bench of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. I am a federal judge appointed by President Barack Obama, confirmed by the United States Senate in a vote of 94-2. And Victoria didn't know. Not until the night she introduced me to his family as, and I quote, my younger sister. She works in law. Government law. Said it the way you'd say waste management. The way you'd say telemarketing. And Judge Thomas Reynolds, 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, United States Circuit Court Judge, one of the most respected legal minds in the country, extended his hand to me across the table. Our eyes met. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. He understood immediately. And then later that evening, when Victoria had pushed too far, when my family had outdone themselves performing their certainty that I was nothing, he looked directly at me and asked the question that changed everything. What's your title, Elena? The table went silent. And I told them, I'm a federal judge. United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. Victoria's wine glass shattered. And what happened next took 15 years in the making. Stay with me, because this story, my story, is about more than a single moment of truth at a dinner table. It's about what happens when you spend your entire adult life being made small by the people who were supposed to love you most. It's about the silence you learn to live in, the weight of being perpetually underestimated, and the extraordinary, almost indescribable relief of finally being seen. If you have ever been dismissed by your own family, if you have ever sat across the table from someone who loves you and felt completely invisible, this story is for you. If you've ever been told directly or indirectly that you don't measure up, that your choices are lesser, your life smaller, your ambitions more modest than you should settle for, I want you to watch every single second of this. Because Elena Martinez didn't yell. She didn't post a clapback. She didn't go low when they went lower. She just lived her life. Quietly. Brilliantly. And then one evening in Georgetown she simply told the truth. And the truth was devastating. Hit that like button if you're already invested. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Tell me what happened. Let's get into it. To understand what happened at that dinner table in Georgetown, you need to understand what it was like to grow up a Martinez in Northern Virginia. The family lived in the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business and cared deeply about appearances. Upper middle class, comfortable. Not rich, but the kind of family that had the right zip code, the right country club membership, the right cars in the driveway. David and Marie Martinez ran a successful accounting firm, were well liked at their country club, attended the right charity galas, and had 2 daughters they were very proud of, though they were proud of them in very different ways. Victoria was 3 years older than Elena. And from the very beginning Victoria was the golden child. We're not talking about a quiet favoritism here. We're talking about the kind of dynamic that gets established so early in a family that it simply becomes the water you swim in. Nobody decides it consciously. Nobody sits down and says, this child is special and this one is not. It just accumulates, moment by moment, comment by comment, until one day you realize that the roles are so calcified, so deeply embedded in everyone's understanding of who the family is, that questioning them feels not just uncomfortable but structurally threatening. Victoria was bright, ambitious, high-achieving. Straight A's. Debate team captain. She had a way of filling a room that made people pay attention. She was exactly the kind of daughter that Northern Virginia country club parents brag about at Saturday morning rounds of golf. He got a full scholarship to Georgetown. Of course she did. Elena was different. Elena was quiet, introspective, the kind of person who spent more time in the library than at family dinners. Not shy exactly, just internal. She thought deeply about things. She didn't talk unless she had something worth saying. She didn't perform. And in a family like the Martinezes, in a culture like theirs, not performing was essentially indistinguishable from failing. Elena read voraciously. Law, philosophy, history. She was fascinated by the mechanics of justice. How systems were built, how they could be corrupted, how they could be reformed. She spent high school in the stacks of the local library the way other kids spent it at the mall. Her parents were politely baffled by her. Victoria was less polite. "You need to get out more," Victoria would say, not unkindly but not kindly either. "You can't just read your way through life, Elena." "I'm not reading my way through life," Elena would say. "I'm preparing." Victoria would laugh. The laugh that would follow Elena for the next 20 years. The one that said, "Preparing for what? You're not going anywhere." When it came time for college applications, Victoria made her position clear. Elena should not apply to Georgetown. This was Victoria's school. Victoria's territory. Victoria's achievement. "You'd embarrass me there," she said. "The people I know, the circles I run in, it would be awkward." Elena looked at her steadily and said nothing. She applied to a state school instead. Not because she couldn't get in elsewhere, but because the state school had a law program she was interested in, offered her a partial scholarship, and cost her parents significantly less. A fact she noticed even though they never asked her to notice it. He took out loans for the rest. Worked nights as a paralegal while carrying a full course load. Victoria told everyone at Georgetown that her younger sister was going to a state school because she simply couldn't get in anywhere competitive. Elena heard about it at Thanksgiving. Said nothing. Ate her turkey. Went back to studying. Elena graduated at the top of her law school class. Not near the top, though. She didn't tell her family about the honor. Not because she was hiding it, she mentioned it briefly at Easter. Victoria said, "That's nice," and pivoted immediately to talking about a raise she'd gotten at work. After graduation, Elena got a clerkship. A prestigious, fiercely competitive, resume-defining clerkship with a federal district court judge named Frank Davidson. When she told her family, Victoria's response was immediate and definitive. "A clerk? That's basically a secretary, Elena. I thought you wanted to be a real lawyer." Elena looked at her older sister across the family dinner table. Thought about explaining that federal clerkships are among the most sought-after positions in the legal world, that they are the launching pads of careers at the highest levels of the law, that the competition is brutal, that being selected was an extraordinary honor. He decided not to. Victoria needed to win. He always had. Correcting her didn't teach her anything. It just made her angrier, more inventive in her dismissals, more committed to her narrative. So Elena said nothing. Let Victoria believe what she needed to believe. And went to work every morning for Judge Frank Davidson with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was building. Here is the thing about Frank Davidson that Victoria didn't know, that nobody in the Martinez family bothered to ask about. 5 years after Elena's clerkship, Frank Davidson became the Attorney General of the United States. Not a mid-level bureaucrat. Not a regional administrator. The Attorney General. The top law enforcement officer in the country. One of the most powerful legal figures in Washington, D.C. Elena had clerked for him when he was a district court judge. She had sat in his chambers, learned how he thought, watched him deliberate over difficult cases, absorbed his approach to the law, which was rigorous, principled, and utterly without pretension. He had told her early in her clerkship, "The law is not about power. It's about accountability. Your job is to hold the line even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable." She never forgot it. When Davidson was confirmed as Attorney General, Elena sent him a brief, warm note of congratulations. He called her personally. "Elena," he said, his voice warm with the ease of someone who doesn't waste words on pleasantries, "I hope you know that clerkship went both ways. You were one of the finest legal minds I had the privilege of working with. Whatever you do next, do it at full capacity. No holding back." He thanked him. Meant it. Then she went to work as a federal prosecutor. Federal prosecution is not a job for people who want recognition. It is unglamorous work. It is long hours in fluorescent-lit offices reviewing thousands of pages of documents. It is arguing complex legal theories before skeptical judges. It is the particular loneliness of knowing that the case you're building, the case that is consuming your entire life, will be reported in a newspaper headline as a paragraph, if it's reported at all. Elena Martinez was extraordinary at it. She prosecuted violent crimes, organized crime, public corruption. She went after people who thought their power made them untouchable. She won cases that other prosecutors had written off. She developed a reputation in federal legal circles as someone who was meticulous, creative, and absolutely unshakable under pressure. Her colleagues respected her enormously. Opposing counsel feared her quietly. Judges noted her name. At family dinners, Victoria told people she was doing okay for a government employee. Elena would hear this secondhand from a cousin or a family friend, or occasionally from her mother, who would deliver it not as criticism but as simple fact, the way you'd report the weather. Victoria says you're doing okay at the government job. Yes, Mom. That's nice, dear. She ate her dinner, went home, prepared her next case. Elena was 29 years old when someone recommended her for a federal judgeship. Let that settle for a moment. 29. The youngest candidate to be considered for a federal judgeship in her circuit in over a decade. Federal judges are not hired. They are nominated by the President of the United States. They are vetted by the FBI. They are examined by the Senate Judiciary Committee. They are confirmed by the full United States Senate. And then, if they survive all of that, they are given a lifetime appointment to the federal bench. It is one of the most consequential, most prestigious, most genuinely powerful positions in the American legal system. Federal judges shape law. Their opinions get cited by appellate courts. They decide cases that affect the lives of millions of people. Their decisions outlast presidencies. The vetting process for Elena's nomination took 18 months. 18 months of background checks, FBI interviews, Senate hearings, an exhaustive examination of every case she'd ever prosecuted, every decision she'd ever made, every word she'd ever written in any professional capacity. During those 18 months, Victoria was busy planning her second wedding. She had divorced her first husband, Bradley, a corporate attorney she had married straight out of college, for what she described as his lack of ambition. She was now engaged to Richard, a pharmaceutical executive with a better zip code and a vacation home in the Outer Banks. At their engagement party, surrounded by friends and family and canapes, Victoria raised a glass and announced, "At least one Martinez married successfully." The room laughed. Elena was standing in the corner with a glass of sparkling water, having just gotten off a phone call with her Senate contact about the timeline for her confirmation hearing. She smiled politely, said nothing. 3 months after Victoria's engagement party, Elena Martinez was confirmed to the federal bench of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. The Senate vote was 94-2. She did not invite her family to the ceremony. Not out of malice. Not out of secrecy exactly. She simply didn't. The thought of watching Victoria turn it into something about herself, into a competition, into a comparison, into a complicated family drama at the moment Elena had worked her entire adult life toward, was more than she could bear. So she went with colleagues, shook hands with senators, received her commission, put on her robes, and became Judge Elena Martinez. Attorney General Davidson, he was AG by then, called personally to congratulate her. "Elena," he said, and she could hear the genuine pride in his voice, "you earned this. Every bit of it. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." "I won't," she said. She meant it in that moment. She didn't quite know yet how hard the next 13 years would make that promise to keep. 13 years. Think about that number for a moment. 13 years is a significant portion of a human life. It's enough time to watch children grow from infants to teenagers. Enough time to see cities change, relationships evolve, people become unrecognizably different from who they were. For 13 years, Elena Martinez sat on the federal bench. She presided over high-profile cases. She wrote opinions that were cited by appellate courts. She mentored young attorneys. She was invited to speak at legal conferences at Harvard, Yale, Stanford. She collaborated with other federal judges on task forces and publications. She built a reputation quietly and steadily as one of the finest jurists in the Eastern District. She was, by any objective measure, an extraordinary success. And for those same 13 years, her family thought she was a mid-level government lawyer making around $75,000 a year. For context, federal judges make $223,400 annually. Not that Victoria ever bothered to check. Let me paint you a picture of Elena's actual life during those 13 years. The life that existed entirely outside Victoria's carefully constructed narrative. She lived in a townhouse in Old Town Alexandria. A 3-story historic building with original crown molding, hardwood floors that had been polished to a warm honey gleam, a garden courtyard where she drank her coffee on weekend mornings, and a kitchen she had renovated with the kind of quiet elegance that comes from knowing exactly what you want and being able to afford it. The house was worth $1.8 million when she paid cash for it. Not from family money, not from an inheritance, but from careful investment of her federal judge's salary over the better part of a decade. She drove a Toyota Camry to work. Reliable, anonymous, practical. Victoria thought this was evidence of a modest income. In Elena's garage, invisible to anyone who didn't come inside, sat a vintage Mercedes that she drove on weekends, a beautiful, meticulously maintained machine that she had purchased because she genuinely loved it, not because she needed anyone to see it. She was in a relationship with Michael, a fellow federal judge, brilliant and warm, with whom she'd been for 4 years. They kept their relationship private for the usual reasons that federal judges keep their personal lives private. The nature of the job, the appearance of judicial independence, the simple preference for a life that isn't performed for an audience. She attended judicial conferences, co-authored articles, presided over cases that made national news. Victoria never noticed. Victoria didn't read legal news. Why would she? Legal news wasn't relevant to Victoria's world. Her sister was just a government employee. While Elena was doing all of this, Victoria was narrating the story of their family lives to anyone who would read her Instagram feed. Victoria was a devoted and prolific user of social media. Her Instagram was a carefully curated aesthetic experience. Designer clothes, gallery openings, charity galas, beautifully plated restaurant meals, and the occasional artfully framed photo of her and her husband looking effortlessly prosperous. She also posted about Elena. Not often, not overtly, but regularly enough and consistently enough that the message was unmistakable to anyone paying attention. There was the post from a year ago, a photo of both sisters at a family event, Victoria in a designer dress, Elena arriving in her Camry. Caption: "So grateful for my journey. Some people settle for ordinary lives. I chose extraordinary. #blessed, #success, #family first." She had tagged Elena in the photo. There was the post from Dad's birthday, Victoria with her husband, both of them glamorous and beaming in the foreground. Elena visible in the background, slightly blurred, standing alone. Caption: "Thankful for sisters even when we take very different paths. Some of us aim high." There were the texts. The regular, small, cutting texts that arrived in Elena's phone with the casual frequency of weather updates. "Make sure you dress appropriately for dinner. Mark's family is used to a certain level of sophistication. I know that's not your world, but please try. And, the important thing is you're happy with your life, Elena, even if it's not what most people would choose. And, don't mention what you do too much. It can be embarrassing to explain government work to successful people." Elena read them, replied briefly, politely, set her phone down, went back to reviewing briefs. For 13 years. This is the question that everyone asks. But why did a woman with Elena's intelligence, Elena's accomplishments, Elena's standing in the legal community, allow this to go on for 13 years? Why didn't she simply say something? Why didn't she correct the record? Why didn't she tell her family who she actually was? It's easy from the outside to frame this as weakness, as a failure of self-advocacy, as a character flaw. But that framing misunderstands the psychology of families like the Martinezes. And it misunderstands Elena. Elena had tried in the early years to correct Victoria's assumptions. Small corrections, gentle ones. She'd mention cases she was working on, and Victoria would talk over her. She'd reference something she'd accomplished, and Victoria would redirect to something she herself had done. She'd push back on a characterization, and Victoria would escalate, become defensive, turn it into a drama that poisoned the entire family gathering for days afterward. Elena learned, through painful repetition, that correcting Victoria didn't produce the outcome of Victoria knowing the truth. It produced the outcome of Victoria being angry and Elena being blamed for the disruption. So she stopped correcting her. And then something interesting happened. Victoria relaxed. When she stopped having to compete with Elena. When Elena became, in the family narrative, the lesser sister, the ordinary one, the cautionary tale, Victoria became almost pleasant. The dinners became easier. The conversations became less fraught. Elena bought herself peace by making herself small. And for years she told herself this was fine. That she didn't need her family's validation. That she had her work, her colleagues, her life, and that was enough. Worked mostly. Until it didn't. Victoria's third marriage was falling apart. Richard, the pharmaceutical executive, had turned out to be, in Victoria's estimation, insufficiently status conscious. He didn't care enough about the right things. Didn't have the right friends. Didn't move in the right circles. Victoria was 44 years old, twice divorced, and deeply determined that her third marriage would be the one that finally locked in her place in the world she was convinced she deserved. Enter Mark Reynolds. Mark was 38. A senior associate at a prominent white-shoe law firm in Washington. Handsome in the conventional, well-groomed way of men who grew up wearing blazers to school. Charming in the way of someone who has been taught to make people feel important. Ambitious in the way that Victoria recognized and valued. He was, by any standard Victoria applied, an excellent candidate. But it was his father who made him irresistible. Victoria found out about Judge Thomas Reynolds on Mark's second date. She called Elena immediately. Elena. Her voice was lit up with the particular excitement she reserved for social coups. Mark's father is a federal judge. Not some district court nobody, a circuit court judge. Do you know what that means? Yes, Elena said quietly. I know what that means. Of course you don't. It means he's basically one step below the Supreme Court. It means Mark comes from a family that matters. That has real influence. Federal judges, senators, CEOs. Mark's world is extraordinary. That's wonderful, Victoria. I'm happy for you. I need you to understand something. Victoria's voice went cold in that way it had, where the warmth of excitement calcified instantly into calculation. This is the most important relationship of my life. Mark's family moves in circles you can't even imagine. His mother went to Wellesley. They summer in Martha's Vineyard. I understand. Do you? Because I can't have you embarrassing me, Elena. I can't have Mark's family thinking the Martinez family is ordinary. Elena said nothing. You're going to meet them eventually. When you do, just don't talk about your job too much. Don't mention you work for the government. If anyone asks, say you're in law. That's technically true. Okay, Victoria. And for God's sake, buy a decent outfit. None of your clearance rack blazers. Elena looked around her study, at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the photographs from judicial conferences, the framed commission signed by the President of the United States, and said nothing. Okay, Victoria. What followed was 6 months that Elena found in a dark way quietly fascinating. Victoria threw herself into the project of becoming worthy of the Reynolds family with the focused intensity she brought to everything she deemed important. She joined the boards of 3 charities, not because she particularly cared about the causes, but because it was the right kind of civic engagement for the wife of a prominent Washington attorney. She started attending gallery openings. She hired a personal stylist. Her Instagram pivoted dramatically, less lifestyle, more cultural sophistication. Carefully framed photos from museum exhibitions. Book club discussions about literary fiction. Dinner party shots with the right mix of interesting, accomplished-looking people. She called Elena once a month with updates. Mark's mother mentioned they vacation in Nantucket. I'm learning about Nantucket. Did you know there's a difference between Nantucket and the Hamptons, Elena? Of course you didn't. Mark's father knows Senator Williams. They went to Yale together. Can you imagine? My future father-in-law knows senators personally. I met Mark's sister Catherine. She's a partner at a venture capital firm. A partner, Elena. She manages a $400 million fund. Elena listened. Said congratulations. Went back to her life. In March, she presided over a public corruption trial that made national news. A state senator taking bribes from real estate developers in a scheme that had been running for nearly a decade. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Her rulings were covered by the Washington Post and the New York Times. Legal journals wrote about the case for months afterward. Victoria never mentioned it. She didn't read legal news. In April, Elena was invited to speak at a Harvard Law Symposium on federal sentencing reform. Judge Thomas Reynolds was the keynote speaker. They had dinner with several other judges the night before. It was an elegant dinner at a hotel near the Harvard campus. 8 or 9 judges around a long table, all of them engaged in the kind of conversation that only happens when the people in the room have spent their careers thinking about the same problems from every possible angle. Elena was laughing at something a colleague had said when Judge Reynolds leaned toward her slightly. "Elena," he said, "I keep meaning to ask, any relation to a Victoria Martinez in Arlington? My son Mark is engaged to a Victoria Martinez." Elena felt the world very slightly shift. "That's my sister," she said. His eyebrows rose. "Your sister? Mark never mentioned. Does she know you're a judge?" And here it was. The moment Elena had been dreading and in some quiet part of herself, had known was coming eventually. "It's complicated," she said carefully. "I keep my private life very private." He studied her. Judge Reynolds had spent 30 years reading witnesses, reading lawyers, reading situations with the precision of someone who had learned that the truth was usually visible to anyone paying close enough attention. "Family doesn't know?" he said. "No, sir." "That must be difficult." Elena considered this. "It's easier this way. My sister needs certain things to be true about me. Letting her think I'm unsuccessful means she's happy. Everyone wins." Judge Reynolds frowned. Not disapprovingly, thoughtfully. The way he frowned when a legal argument was technically competent but morally incomplete. "That's not winning, Elena," he said. "That's hiding." "With respect, Your Honor," she said quietly, "it's surviving." He didn't push. But she saw something in his expression as the dinner continued. Concern perhaps. Or the particular kind of understanding that comes from having watched too many people make themselves small for the comfort of those who should have simply been bigger. She drove back to her hotel thinking about the word he'd used. Hiding. Was that what she was doing? Probably. In May, Mark proposed. He rented a private room at the Four Seasons in Georgetown. Arranged a string quartet. Had roses delivered. The proposal was Instagram perfect, and Victoria posted the entire thing, including the video of herself gasping and saying yes, before the champagne had even been poured. She called Elena the next morning. "It's official. I'm going to be part of the Reynolds family." Her voice was at a pitch Elena had only heard a few times. The real excitement unfiltered by calculation, the genuine joy of someone who has gotten exactly what they wanted. "Mark's already talking about me joining his mother's foundation board. Can you imagine? Me on a board with federal judges' wives and senators' wives." "That's wonderful," Elena said and meant it mostly. "We're having an engagement dinner next month. Small, intimate. Just immediate family. Pause. Which means I need you to come." "Of course." "But Elena." The warmth receded. The calculation returned. "I need you to understand. This isn't like our family dinners. These are sophisticated people. Mark's father has argued before the Supreme Court. His mother studied at Oxford. They're not going to understand your lifestyle." "My lifestyle?" "You know what I mean. The government job. The lack of, look, just please don't talk about work. Don't mention money. Don't embarrass me." Elena closed her eyes. She could have told her then. Right there on the phone she could have ended the charade. Told Victoria that she already knew Judge Reynolds. That they were colleagues. That she had appeared before him as a prosecutor, sat on panels with him, would be presenting alongside him at Harvard in 3 weeks. Instead she said, "I'll be on my best behavior." June 15th. The Ivy restaurant in Georgetown. Elena drove there in the Camry because she knew Victoria would be watching the parking lot. She wore a navy silk dress from her closet. Understated, elegant, the kind of dress that whispers rather than shouts its quality. Pearl earrings from Michael. Shoes she'd bought at a department store in New York during a judicial conference 3 years ago and worn exactly 4 times since. She arrived exactly on time. Victoria was already there. She wore a white designer dress that probably cost $3,000, her hair professionally blown out, her makeup immaculate. She looked stunning and she knew it, and the knowledge was visible in the way she held herself. like someone who has dressed for a performance and is ready for the curtain to rise. She grabbed Elena's arm the moment she walked in. "You're here. Good." Her voice was a hissed whisper. "Listen, Mark's family isn't here yet. When they arrive, let me do the talking. Don't volunteer information about yourself. If anyone asks what you do, just say law and change the subject." "Understood. And please don't mention that apartment of yours or that car. Mark's sister drives a Tesla. His mother has a Mercedes. They don't need to know you're struggling." Elena nearly laughed. Nearly. She thought about the vintage Mercedes in her garage. She thought about Catherine Reynolds, who had complimented her townhouse during a judicial function last month, not knowing, of course, that it belonged to Elena's sister's future sister-in-law. She thought about what Victoria would do if she knew. "I'll be discreet," Elena said. "Thank you." Victoria's grip on her arm tightened briefly, almost warmly. "This is important to me, Elena. This family, they're everything I've worked for." "Everything you've worked for," Elena thought, "isn't the same thing as everything you deserve." She said nothing. Their parents arrived together. David Martinez was in his country club blazer. Navy blue, gold buttons, the kind of blazer that says "I belong here" in the specific language of suburban Virginia respectability. Marie Martinez wore her pearls. The good ones, Elena noticed. The ones she kept for special occasions. They hugged Victoria. Then they nodded at Elena. The usual. "Now, Elena," her mother said, touching her arm briefly, "Victoria told us about Mark's family. Very impressive. Please don't mention your job too much. We don't want them thinking we're ordinary." "I understand," Elena said. She watched her parents settle in beside Victoria, watched how naturally they arranged themselves around her older sister, how the family formed as it always had, with Victoria at the center and Elena at the edge. She had seen this configuration for 42 years. She understood it the way you understand the weather in the city where you grew up. Not as something good or bad, simply as the prevailing condition. Mark arrived first. He was exactly as advertised. Tall, well-dressed, with the easy confidence of someone who has always moved through rooms where he was expected and welcome. Behind him came his family. Judge Thomas Reynolds. Elena had last seen him 3 months ago at the Harvard dinner. In court attire, or what passed for casual attire in his world, he was formidable. Tall, silver-haired, with the particular bearing of someone who has spent decades in rooms where his word carried enormous weight and has absorbed that authority into the very way he stood and moved. His wife Caroline wore a Chanel suit with the ease of someone for whom Chanel was simply appropriate attire, not an aspiration. She had intelligent eyes and a warm mouth and the look of someone who had heard every possible type of conversation at every possible type of dinner and was genuinely curious which kind this one would turn out to be. Catherine Reynolds was remarkable. Elena had seen her briefly at judicial events. They ran in adjacent circles without quite overlapping, but up close she was more striking. The sharp pantsuit, the confident posture, the particular quality of attention that distinguishes people who have made serious decisions under pressure from people who have merely performed seriousness. Mark made introductions. Judge Reynolds worked his way around the table. He shook David Martinez's hand warmly. He greeted Marie with the gracious courtesy of someone who has done this 1,000 times. He turned to Elena. Their eyes met. He saw it happen in real time. She saw him recognize her. She saw the recognition resolve into understanding. "Ah, that's who this is." And then into calculation, "How do I handle this?" She gave the smallest possible shake of her head. Almost imperceptible. Asterisk, "Not here. Not now." Asterisk. He paused for a fraction of a second, the kind of pause that only a highly trained observer would catch. Then he smiled, extended his hand and said with perfect smoothness, "Elena. Nice to meet you." "Your Honor," Elena said quietly. "The pleasure is mine." Victoria shot her a sharp look. "Just Mr. Reynolds, Elena. Don't be weird." Judge Reynolds' expression didn't flicker. He simply smiled pleasantly and turned to continue introductions. They sat down at a large round table. Victoria had clearly thought about the seating arrangement. She positioned herself between Mark and Judge Reynolds, the two most important people in the room from her perspective, and put Elena at the far end between Catherine and her father. The dinner started with the kind of pleasant surface conversation that these events always start with. Wedding venues, guest lists, the logistics of large celebrations. Victoria dominated. She had clearly been rehearsing. She was warm, sophisticated sounding, attentive to Judge Reynolds in a way that managed to be flattering without being obsequious, though only barely. She laughed at the right moments, asked questions that demonstrated she had done her research on the Reynolds family's various interests and affiliations. "We're thinking September," she said, touching Mark's arm. "At the Ritz-Carlton in Tysons. 500 guests. Black tie." "That sounds lovely," Caroline Reynolds said, with the polite warmth of someone who has heard this plan described at many different tables. "Mark's father will invite so many important people." Victoria's voice was bright with excitement. "Won't you, Judge Reynolds? You must know everyone in Washington legal circles." "I know a few people," he said carefully. "Mark says you have senators on speed dial. That you've argued before the Supreme Court. That's incredible. I've always admired people in positions of real power." She let the phrase hang for a moment, then glanced down the table at Elena with an expression that was entirely invisible to everyone except Elena. Judge Reynolds' jaw tightened. Just slightly. Elena caught it. "Power is relative," he said. "The most powerful people I know are often the ones working quietly without recognition." Victoria missed the subtext entirely. She was already nodding along, preparing her next sentence. "Oh, absolutely. But there's something to be said for achievement. For making something of yourself." Another glance at Elena. "Not everyone has that drive." "Elena's always been content with less," Marie Martinez added helpfully. Catherine looked down the table at Elena with an expression that was sharp and focused in a way that made Elena slightly uneasy. Not unpleasantly, but in the way you feel uneasy when someone is looking at you more carefully than they should need to. "What do you do, Elena?" she asked. Before Elena could draw breath, Victoria jumped in. "She works for the government. Local courts, nothing exciting. It's fine for her. She's never been ambitious." "Local courts," Catherine repeated. He was still looking at Elena. There was something in her gaze, a question forming or perhaps a question being confirmed. "It's a living," Elena said quietly. "Must be interesting though," Catherine pressed. "What kind of law?" "Criminal," Elena said. "Federal criminal law." "Federal." Judge Reynolds' voice was carefully neutral. "That's not local courts." Victoria waved her hand. "Same difference. Government legal work. You know how it is, bureaucratic low level." Elena's comfortable there. The table went quiet. And then Elena's father decided to help. "The important thing," David Martinez said, smiling at Victoria with genuine warmth, "is that one of our daughters is successful. We're very proud of Victoria's accomplishments. Her marriage to Mark, joining this family, it's quite an achievement." "An achievement," Judge Reynolds repeated softly. His voice was still perfectly pleasant. But Elena had watched him on the bench. She recognized the particular quietness of someone who was listening very carefully and saying very little. "Well, yes," Marie Martinez agreed. "The Reynolds family is so distinguished. Federal judges, important connections. It's everything a parent hopes for." Elena watched Judge Reynolds' face. Watched him understand, piece by piece, what her life had actually been. Why she'd hidden. What it had cost. Victoria was in full performance mode now, radiating satisfaction. "I've worked hard to be worthy of Mark. To be someone his family can be proud of." "And Elena?" Caroline Reynolds asked quietly. The question was simple. Gentle even. But it landed differently than anything else that had been said. "What about Elena?" Victoria laughed. That particular nervous, dismissive laugh that she used when she wanted to deflect without appearing to deflect. "Elena's fine with her life. She's never wanted more." "Haven't you, Elena?" Caroline asked, looking directly at her. Everyone turned. Elena felt the weight of the table's attention. Could have ended it right there. Could have said something deflecting, something polite, something that would preserve the equilibrium. Instead she said, "I'm content." Victoria pounced on it. "See, Elena knows her limits. Not everyone needs to be successful. Some people are just ordinary. And that's okay." She said it with the warmth of someone being gracious, being generous, granting forgiveness to someone lesser. David Martinez nodded. "We've accepted that our daughters are very different. Victoria aims high. Elena aims realistically." Judge Reynolds set down his fork. "What?" he said, his voice still polite but with something underneath it that made Elena think of the sound of a door locking. Makes you think Elena isn't successful? The question hung in the air like something irretrievable. Victoria laughed, but it was a nervous sound now. Well, I mean, she works a government job. She drives a Camry. She lives in an apartment. No offense to Elena, but success looks different for different people. No offense taken, Elena said quietly. Catherine was staring at her now. Really staring. Wait. Federal criminal law. How long have you been doing that? A while, Elena said. And what's your title? Catherine pressed, her voice containing the particular precision of someone who suspects they already know the answer. Victoria interrupted. Does it matter? Can we talk about the wedding? I want Catherine's advice on venues. What's your title, Elena? Judge Reynolds' voice. Quiet. Unanswerable. The table went completely silent. Elena looked at Victoria. At her parents. At their smug, comfortable certainty that she was the family failure. That this was simply a fact as unremarkable as the weather. She looked at Judge Reynolds. He gave her the slightest nod. No. Tell them now. Elena drew a breath. Put her hands flat on the tablecloth. And said clearly and without hesitation. I'm a federal judge. United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. The silence that followed was unlike any silence Elena had ever experienced at a dinner table. It was the silence of a room that has had its entire architecture changed in 5 seconds. Then Victoria laughed. High-pitched. Disbelieving. The laugh of someone who has just heard something so absurd that laughter is the only available response. What? Elena, don't, her mother said. That's not funny. I'm not joking. You're a judge, her mother said slowly. Since when? 13 years. Her father shook his head. That's impossible. You work in a court, you've told us. I told you I work in federal criminal law, Elena said. I do. I preside over federal criminal cases. Victoria's face had gone red. You're lying. You can't be a federal judge. Federal judges are appointed by the president, Judge Reynolds said quietly. Confirmed by the Senate. They serve lifetime appointments. He paused. Elena, when were you confirmed? March 2011. President Obama. Senate vote was 94-2. The color drained from Victoria's face. Catherine had already pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with the quick, precise efficiency of someone who lives by data. She typed. Found something. Turned the screen. A photograph. Elena in her robes at a judicial conference the previous year. The caption beneath it. Judge Elena Martinez, U.S. District Court, Eastern District of Virginia. Holy. Marie Martinez grabbed the phone. Stared at it. Stared at the photograph of her younger daughter in her judicial robes, holding a gavel, surrounded by other judges, looking completely at ease. Victoria, that's you in judge robes. Yes, Elena said. But you said she looked at Victoria. Did you know? Of course I didn't know. Victoria's voice was rising. The red in her face was deepening toward something approaching purple. She lied to us. She let us think she was nobody. I never lied, Elena said, and her voice was absolutely calm. I told you I worked in federal criminal law. I do. You assumed I was low level. I didn't correct you. That's lying by omission. Elena looked at her steadily. Is it? You called me a secretary. Called my work nothing. Told me not to embarrass you. When exactly was I supposed to correct you? Judge Reynolds was watching this unfold with an expression Elena recognized from court. The expression a judge wears when a witness is in the process of destroying their own credibility, not with satisfaction, but with the particular gravity of someone watching something that cannot be undone. You've known each other, Mark said slowly, looking between Elena and his father. You know her. Judge Martinez and I have served on several judicial panels together, Judge Reynolds said. She's one of the finest legal minds I've had the pleasure of working with. Victoria stood up. Her chair scraped back against the floor. This is insane. You're all insane. Elena is not a federal judge. He can't be. I would have known. Would you? Elena asked quietly. When's the last time you asked about my work? When's the last time you asked about my life at all? Victoria turned to her parents. Tell them Elena's not a judge. But Marie Martinez was still staring at Catherine's phone. scrolling through search result after search result with the expression of someone whose understanding of the world is being fundamentally rearranged. There are articles, she said. Her voice was strange, hollow. So many articles. She read one, then another. Her lips moved slightly as she scrolled. Judge Martinez presides over corruption trial. Judge Martinez opinion cited by Fourth Circuit. She looked up. Elena, is this real? Yes. David Martinez had read over his wife's shoulder. His face went pale, not with anger but with the shock of realizing something he couldn't ignore. You sent a senator to prison? He was taking bribes. The evidence was overwhelming. You've been a federal judge for 13 years, he said slowly. And you never told us. You never asked, Elena replied. You assumed. I let you. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. Why would you hide this? Do you know how this makes me look? I've spent years telling Mark's family you're ordinary, that I'm the successful one. Yes, Elena said calmly. You have. You made me look like an idiot. No, Victoria. You did that yourself. The room fell silent. Why let everyone think you're a failure? Victoria demanded. Because you needed me to be. Victoria froze. You built your identity on being better than me, Elena said. If you'd known the truth 13 years ago, you would have turned it into a competition and found a way to dismiss it. That's not true. Your first reaction wasn't pride. It was anger that I made you look bad. Mark stared at Victoria. His expression said everything. Victoria turned to Judge Reynolds. You understand, right? Your son is marrying into a family that's been lying. Judge Reynolds looked at her steadily. My son is marrying into a family where one daughter has served with distinction as a federal judge for over a decade, sent corrupt officials to prison, and earned the respect of her peers. He paused. And where another daughter has spent those same years tearing her sister down. Victoria's face fell. Caroline Reynolds spoke gently. Elena, why reveal this now? Elena looked at her family. Because I realized no matter how small I made myself, Victoria would always need someone beneath her. And I'm done being that person. I never asked you to do that, Victoria said. You didn't have to. Every holiday, every dinner, it was always the same. Don't outshine me. Don't embarrass me. Elena stood. For 13 years I've let you introduce me as the less successful sister. I convinced myself keeping the peace was worth it. She glanced at Judge Reynolds. But I won't let your version of me become the truth for people I respect. You're doing this for revenge. No. I'm doing it because I deserve better. She picked up her purse. I'm sorry this is how you had to meet my family. Don't apologize, Judge Reynolds said. You have nothing to apologize for. Her father spoke uncertainly. Elena, wait. No, Dad. I'm done staying quiet. I'm done making myself smaller so Victoria can feel bigger. She looked at her sister. I hope you're happy. I hope you build a good life. But I won't be part of a family that requires me to pretend I'm someone I'm not. You're leaving. Yes. Outside, Catherine caught up with her. Judge Martinez. Can I walk you out? They stepped into the warm evening air. So, Catherine said. Federal judge. So, venture capital. They both laughed. My sister's been talking about this dinner for months, Catherine said. About how much more accomplished she was than you. I know. I googled you 2 weeks ago. Found your judicial record. Recognized your name from cases I studied in law school. You knew. I did. I wanted to see whether you were hiding, or whether your family simply couldn't see you. Elena smiled faintly. Probably both. Catherine nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. And I think my brother just realized he may be marrying the wrong sister. He loves her. Maybe. But Elena, we're not your family. We see you. Something inside Elena finally loosened. Thank you. She drove home. Not to the tiny apartment her family imagined, but to her beautiful townhouse with its quiet garden. Sitting outside with a glass of wine, she finally relaxed. A text arrived from Michael. Family dinner was interesting. I'll tell you tomorrow. He called immediately. Interesting good or interesting bad? Interesting necessary. Both. You told them. I told them. How do you feel? Elena thought for a moment. Free. And for the first time in years she truly meant it. The text started that night. Victoria, I can't believe you did this. You ruined everything. Her mother, we need to talk. This isn't how family handles things. Elena turned off her phone. The next morning there were missed calls and voicemails. Her father demanded she apologize. Her mother cried, asking why she'd hidden the truth. Victoria claimed Mark was reconsidering the engagement and blamed Elena for destroying her life. Then came one unexpected voicemail. Elena, it's Catherine. Mark's parents aren't questioning the relationship because you're a judge. They're questioning it because of how Victoria treated you. There's a difference. Also, Dad wants to invite you to lunch about a judicial task force. For the first time since the dinner, Elena smiled. Elena called Catherine back. You okay? Catherine asked. Getting there. My family had breakfast this morning. Mark's processing a lot. He's realizing there were red flags he ignored. What kind? The way Victoria judges people. The way she measures worth. Catherine paused. She spent breakfast insisting you manipulated us, that you made her look bad. And Mark asked why she'd spent years calling you a failure without ever asking about your life. She had no answer. Elena sighed. This isn't his fault. No. But it is his problem now. They talked longer. Catherine asked about Elena's Camry and the apartment Victoria always described. I wasn't hiding, Elena explained. I'm a federal judge. I keep my private life private. That's what I thought, Catherine said. But Victoria convinced everyone you lived small because you had no choice. Victoria believes what she needs to believe. Well, my father's been talking about the brilliant Judge Martinez all morning. He'd really like that lunch. Elena smiled. Tell him I'd be honored. Later that day, Judge Reynolds called. I wanted to apologize for last night. You don't need to. I could have stopped things sooner. No, Elena said. It needed to happen. I could have stopped things sooner. No, Elena said. It needed to happen. After a pause, his tone changed. I'm calling as Mark's father. My son loves your sister. But he's also realizing she treated someone I respect very badly. I don't want to come between them. You're not. Victoria's choices are. He sighed. Mark asked whether she can change. What did you tell him? That it's not my decision. But anyone who spent 13 years tearing down her own sister has serious work to do. She's not a bad person. Maybe not. But what I saw wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern. Elena didn't argue. Mark has to decide whether he can build a life with someone who needs others to feel smaller. Thank you. And Elena, he said quietly, I'm proud to call you a colleague. You've earned every bit of respect you've received. After the call, Elena cried. Not from sadness. From relief. For the first time in a very long time, she felt truly seen. 3 weeks later, Elena's clerk knocked. Judge Martinez, your sister is here. Send her in. Victoria looked exhausted. No makeup. Red eyes. None of her usual confidence. She sat across from Elena and slowly looked around the chambers. This is really your office? Yes. You're really a federal judge? Yes. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Victoria spoke. Mark ended our engagement. I'm sorry. Are you? Victoria asked. You got what you wanted. Is that what you think? Isn't it? Elena shook her head. If I wanted to humiliate you, I could have done it years ago. I didn't. Then why now? Because I couldn't stand at your wedding and continue pretending to be your failure story. Victoria looked away. What is our relationship then? She asked quietly. One-sided, Elena answered. Built on you needing me to be less than you. Victoria flinched. When was the last time you asked about my life? Celebrated anything I accomplished? Had a conversation without comparing us? Victoria said nothing. I can't remember either, Elena said softly. I never thought I was that bad, Victoria admitted. Mark says I'm cruel. You thought you were being honest, Elena replied. You saw yourself as the successful sister dealing with the disappointing one. Victoria's eyes filled. But you were never disappointing. You were extraordinary. I just couldn't see it. Yes. For a long moment neither spoke. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if you can. Not yet. Do you want me to try? Elena thought carefully. I want you to figure out who you are without needing me beneath you. Until you do that work, there's nothing to repair. Mark said something similar. Because he's right. Victoria lowered her head. I love him. I know. But love isn't enough if you can't truly see people. After a pause, Victoria asked, will you come to family therapy? Not yet. You need individual therapy first. You need to understand why your self-worth depends on comparison. That's harsh. It's honest. And I'm done avoiding honesty. Victoria stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. I am proud of you, Elena. Federal judge. 13 years. That's incredible. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner. I know. After she left, Elena sat quietly in her chambers. She expected triumph, vindication, something. Instead, she felt only peace. The wound wasn't gone, but for the first time it was finally healing. Her phone buzzed. Michael, dinner tonight? You've been quiet lately. Elena smiled. Yes. And I have stories. That evening, Elena told Michael everything. He listened quietly as he always did. When she finished, he shook his head. That's impressive and depressing at the same time. I know. Are you okay? Elena thought about it. I think so. It feels like I've been carrying something heavy for years and finally put it down. What happens now? How I live my life. Without apologizing for my success or hiding it to make other people comfortable. Michael raised his glass. To Judge Elena Martinez. Elena smiled. To being seen. They clinked glasses. 3 months later, Elena and Judge Reynolds published an article on federal sentencing reform in the Harvard Law Review. The article attracted attention throughout the legal community. Eventually, Elena's parents learned about it through their country club. Her mother called. Your father wants to take you to dinner. We want to celebrate. Elena was silent for a moment. Celebrate the article? Or celebrate because other people finally know what I do? The silence answered her question. Mom, I love you. But until you're proud of me for who I am, not because it looks good for the family, we don't have much to discuss. That's not fair. It's honest. She ended the call gently. Some relationships needed time to change. Elena could wait for that. What she could no longer do was return to the old version of those relationships. 6 months after the dinner, Elena received a wedding invitation. Not from Victoria. Victoria and Mark had ended things permanently. Victoria was attending therapy and trying to rebuild her life. The invitation came from Catherine. She was marrying her longtime partner, Sophie, in Nantucket. Inside was a handwritten note. Catherine wrote that Elena was the kind of person she wanted in her life. Someone who knew her worth and refused to let others define it. At the bottom she added, Dad also wants to trap you into another conversation about sentencing reform. Elena laughed and immediately called her. You're coming? Catherine asked. I'm coming. And congratulations. The wedding was small and beautiful. Elena quickly liked Sophie, whose warmth and humor fit perfectly with Catherine's personality. She spent the evening talking with guests, sharing legal discussions with Judge Reynolds, and enjoying herself more than she expected. She even danced. As she was leaving, Judge Reynolds stopped her. Mark asks about you sometimes. Tell him I'm doing well. He still feels guilty. He shouldn't. People only see things when they're ready to see them. Judge Reynolds smiled. I'm glad you stopped hiding. The legal community is better for it. Thank you, Tom. I think your family will come around eventually. Maybe, Elena said. But I'm not waiting anymore. Good, he replied. On the drive home, Elena received a text from an unknown number. This is Mark. Catherine gave me your number. I wanted to thank you. What happened ended my engagement, but it also helped me see things clearly. I hope you're doing well. Elena read the message twice before replying. I'm doing very well. I hope you find someone who truly sees you. His answer came quickly. I hope Victoria does too. Elena thought about her sister. Victoria was finally doing the difficult work of understanding herself without comparison or competition. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. He's trying, Elena replied. That's something Mark answered. Later, Elena stopped at a rest area and looked out at the highway. Her family had never really known her life. For 13 years she had built an extraordinary career, helped shape federal law, and earned the respect of people she admired. Yet her family had believed she was ordinary because believing anything else would have challenged the story they preferred. Surprisingly, she wasn't angry anymore. Anger had carried her for a while, but it wasn't something she wanted to keep carrying. What remained was simpler. Freedom. She finally felt like herself. She drove home through the autumn night and pulled into the driveway of her townhouse. Her real life. The life she had earned. She had stopped hiding. And being seen had been worth the cost. Elena's story was never about revenge. She didn't plan a dramatic reveal. She didn't spend years waiting for an opportunity to expose anyone. She simply told the truth when remaining silent would have meant participating in her own erasure. That was all. The truth did the rest. Many people understand that feeling. Most of us have been underestimated. Most of us have made ourselves smaller for someone else's comfort. And most of us have wondered what would happen if we stopped. Elena's story reminds us that being seen can be frightening. It means accepting that other people's reactions to the truth belong to them, not to us. It means understanding that the people who truly belong in our lives will recognize our value without asking us to shrink ourselves. For years, Elena chose silence. One evening, she chose honesty instead. And it changed everything. If Elena's story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about resilience, self-worth, and people finally stepping into the truth of who they are. And tell me in the comments, have you ever hidden part of yourself to keep the peace? Or have you ever realized you were seeing someone through the wrong lens? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay visible. Don't let anyone make you small.